Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Matt Gerow Show. It's Matt Gerow. I'm here to bring you another episode. This one's going to be pretty packed. I've got a lot of notes and things that I want to talk about that I've been working on. So probably can't even see that. I'm showing that so fast, but there we go. You can see lots of things written down. It's 3 pages, but anyways, let's just jump into it. So last time we talked about the NBA, we went over what everything kind of was going on in the off season. I touched here and there over different things. That felt pretty good to talk about everything kind of generally, but I could kind of hear myself getting a little bored with the topic. And so, just being completely honest about it, I wanted to pick something that was a little bit more specific so I could be a little more interested in it, basically. And if you're paying any attention to the NBA right now, you'll know that former MVP, number two guy, basically for Philadelphia, James Harden, while he was in China, he was doing one of his camps out there for the kids and stuff. And he got the mic, got on TV, basically had them recording and said, basically, Daryl Morey is a liar and I will never be a part of any organization that he's a part of. And then he said, let me say it again, and then said the same thing again. For context, Daryl Morey is the current general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers. He was also the general manager of the Houston Rockets. And so there's obviously a long story behind those two. And that's kind of what I want to get into. Figure out, how did we end up here? Where now it's like people are joking that he's going to sign with a team. I mean, people are joking about it, but it's been reported that he's even considered it, signing with a team in China and not playing with the NBA or Philadelphia anymore. So let's go way back in time. Back in time about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, October 27th, 2012. Daryl Morey is currently in charge of the Houston Rockets at the time. He is trying to bring a superstar into Houston, and he goes ahead and gets his guy, not through draft, not through free agency. He makes a trade, goes to Oklahoma City, who is kind of in a tough position where they're trying to decide which of all these up-and-coming guys they want to pay. First off, they have Kevin Durant. Also, sorry if you can hear my dog back there. Hey, don't be doing gross stuff on TV. Okay. I love him. Anyways, so I hope you guys can hear that. That's the sound he makes when he itches his head. I can't tell if it's because it feels good or if it feels bad. But if you hear any random moans, it's not that kind of podcast, I promise. It's just my dog. Anyways, going back. So Oklahoma City, they have all these upcoming guys. They have Kevin Durant, they have Russell Westbrook, they have Serge Ibaka, and they have James Harden. And Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook are both making, I think, 19 and 18 or 19 and 17 million a year, something like that. Not very much today, but back then that was a lot for, especially a small market team like the Thunder. And the Thunder had just had a finals run. So they realized they've got this huge potential in this team, but there's a salary cap coming, and it's an even harder salary cap because they're a smaller market team. So they've got to make a decision. They decided, get rid of one of the four guys, commit to the three. Thinking about it, looking at the numbers, seeing which way the league is going, they really like that Serge Ibaka could defend. He was having amazing defensive seasons, having seasons where he was averaging 4 blocks a game. And he was improving offensively each year, extending his range, adding a three-point ball, stuff that they were really liking. They thought, well, we already have our offensive powerhouse in Durant and Westbrook. Let's take the defensive guy. Let's get rid of the other guy who basically has no defense and is all offense. And this isn't as well known, but during the NBA Finals where the Thunder and Miami were playing each other, there were reports that Harden was going out and partying the night before games in Miami. So I that's definitely not something you see typically from Thunder players. It's not the kind of guys they usually go after. Now, that might just be because their guys are so good at hiding when they go and party and stuff. But James Harden, as we know now today, he doesn't hide anything. He's very upfront about his personal life. So that's all in context. We got the whole little story of basically the position the Thunder were in and the position the Rockets were in. Rockets are like, okay, we've got a double-digit scoring guy in Kmart. We'll send you, and we got I think they sent maybe a couple of other guys or draft picks or something. But the point was the Thunder were getting off of Harden. They weren't getting nothing. And the Rockets were getting their next potential guy, their main guy. The Rockets, interestingly enough, weren't scared by the fact that Harden was only averaging 16.8 points per game, 3.7 assists per game, 4.1 rebounds. Morey and his team must have seen that they could take this guy, make him the main guy, and get huge numbers, and they did. That first season in Houston, he averaged 25.9 points per game, 5.8 assists per game, and 4.9 rebounds per game. So jumps across everything, but a huge scoring jump. Almost, let's say he was averaging 17 and jumped to 26. So basically he averaged 9 more points a game. And it wasn't because he was making 3 extra threes. And more impressively is how he did that with basically not as good of a team as he had in Oklahoma City. His best teammates back then were Jeremy Lin and Chandler Parsons. Lin was the starting point guard, and Parsons, I think, was the smalling power forward or small forward, and they were basically the 2 next biggest scorers. Harden's assists only at 5.8 assists. That might surprise you, but Jeremy Lin was averaging, I think, like 6 assists a game that season, so it was kind of split between the two. He hadn't taken on the full load of the offense yet. As a team, they finished 45-37, not bad. Before they got this team set up, they did try to trade for Dwight Howard from Orlando. There was a huge sweepstakes basically going on of moving him because he had requested a trade. He wanted to get out of Orlando and be on a big market name team, and he ends up getting to the Lakers. That basically fizzles out. He doesn't play well with them, doesn't mesh well with Kobe, and he leaves as a free agent that next season. And the team he goes to is Houston, who actually wanted to trade for him. They get him now without having to get anything up. So it obviously worked out better for them. And it gave Harden a whole season to kind of establish himself as the guy, which is important. So we're moving on to the 2013-2014 season. They've got Dwight Howard and James Harden together now. They go 54-28. That's a huge improvement from 45-37, almost 9-game difference there. Kevin McHale is the coach, doing a good job. They get to the first round. They see Portland. It's Damian Lillard and LaMarcus Aldridge, and Aldridge has some great games. If I remember, he had a couple of 40-point games, and some big rebounding numbers. They just basically put them away with no issues. They won in 6 games. So, and I think that game, one of those games ended in a buzzer beater from Lillard. I could be wrong, but he's got a few of those. Lay down, buddy. I know. He hates basketball. Dude just wants to talk about balls that you can be thrown at him. My dog, for the audio listeners I'm talking about. He's sniffing around. The 14-15 season, basically year 2 with Harden and Dwight Howard. They improve a little bit, 56-26. So 2 more wins. They lose that year in the playoffs in 5 games to the Warriors. This is important because this is the first playoff battle between the Rockets and the Warriors back in 2014-2015. As we all know, 2014-2015, that was the season the Rockets basically exploded onto the scene. I believe they finished as the 1 seed. Curry had an amazing season, MVP season. They end up going all the way to the finals and winning their very first championship, and the Splash Bros are born. But before they get there, they have this Western Conference Finals battle between themselves and the Rockets. James Harden gives it his all, but chokes pretty hard in the playoffs, and they lose in 5 games. And the Warriors were just like, to be fair, the Warriors were way ahead of everybody at that point. They were on to something that the rest of the league was going to copycat for the next 10 years. So can't put too much blame on them. They just basically ran into the ultimate juggernaut. 2015-2016 season, we have a huge drop off. They end up only going 41-41, losing the first round in 5 games to the Warriors again. They fire Kevin McHale after about 11 games into the regular season. Part of that has to do with Kevin McHale benching James Harden in the playoffs last season. It's believed. Actually, Kevin McHale just came out with a quote I saw on Twitter from another account saying that he feels like Harden basically knew the next season he was going to come in overweight, not play well, and get Kevin McHale fired for benching him. Kevin McHale, looking at the articles and stuff when he was fired, it came off extremely amicable. Now, there were a lot of people who spoke up and said, how can you fire this coach who's like basically got you 45 wins, 54 wins, 56 wins, and a Western Conference Finals berth? He's a proven player, played with Bird in the Celtics, if you don't know, Special K, championship winner. But obviously, like, let's just be real. Like, he's not meshing. His personality's not meshing with James Harden. James Harden isn't going to like you if you're going to be putting the blame on him. That's just not what he does. The way James Harden looks at it is he spends the whole 82 games playing his ass off, being one of the best players in the league. The coach isn't making, even 50% of what he makes money-wise. So he's not even, his feelings and opinions just really don't matter. And if you start to try to take your outside influence and say it's his fault, he's going to close you off, basically. And that's really what happened. So they got rid of Kevin McHale. They bring in JB Bickerstaff, which is just interesting because that's the recent, if not still, the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers. I'll have to double check that. But at the end of the season, they kind of have him go. Like, they let him go. He's just the interim. They get a better coach, they think. And they do. And Mike D'Antoni. Mike D'Antoni coming off, I'm not sure maybe where he was immediately previously, but a little bit prior to that, he was coaching for Phoenix, coaching Steve Nash's Suns and getting Steve Nash 2 MVPs. And we see that heliocentric point guard style basically play into this Houston Rockets team. But, basically if Steve Nash had taken more 3-pointers, that's basically what we get from James Harden and the Rockets and D'Antoni. And then Dwight Howard leaves in free agency and goes to Atlanta. So, that's basically the end of Dwight's really great career until he wins a championship with the Lakers in 2020. So that's just one player that Harden kind of brought in and didn't elevate. Really wasn't the right guy to bring in. On paper, it made sense. Defense, rebounding, lob threat, but the IQ wasn't there. They are definitely looking for stretch bigs. He's not a stretch big by the slightest. So, and for those who don't know what a stretch big is, that's a big guy who can stretch the floor basically by shooting from farther away, like 3-point shots. So the first season with Mike D'Antoni, 2016-2017 season, we are now 4 years into James Harden being with Houston. All he has to his name is some first round exits and a Western Conference final berth and exit. 16-17 season, they win 55 games. So they get back up to that 55 clip or 56 clip-ish. Harden averages 29.1 points per game, 11.2 assists per game, and 8.1 rebounds per game. Now, the 11.2 assists is important because prior to that, he hadn't averaged double-digit assists. Obviously, Mike D'Antoni and his style of offense is making a difference and making Harden look really good. But they lost in 6 games to the Spurs. And I didn't have it written down, but I want to say this was a first round exit as well. First or second round. It couldn't have been deeper than that. It was the Spurs that once again had LaMarcus Aldridge, but they also had Kawhi Leonard. So they're an extremely good Spurs team. 2017-2018 season, they realized like they have an MVP guy. They need to get another guy to help him out. So Daryl Morey starts looking around the league, trying to see who he could trade for to pair up. And there's kind of similar to when he saw the Oklahoma City situation possibly blowing up. He sees out in the distance LA and the Clippers and Chris Paul and Blake Griffin can't get over the hump. And the Clippers are looking to blow it up. And Chris Paul's looking to leave because he's not going to get the money he wants from the Clippers. So, Oscar, chill with the licking. Hey, stop it. Sorry. It's making a bunch of sound. I'm going to move in front of him so you guys don't have to see that nastiness. Anyways. So 17-18 season, they add Chris Paul in a trade with the Clippers. he comes over and there's a whole discussion about, well, you got two guys who want to hold the ball all the time. That's not going to work. You're going to come down to where you need a final shot and they're going to be battling for it. You're not going to get good shots off. You're not going to have a flow in your offense. People could not have been more wrong. You got two guys with some of the greatest basketball IQ in the entire league. They're going to be able to figure it out. Kobe and Shaq were able to figure it out. These guys can figure it out. Oh, fun note. I just remembered whenever Dwight Howard came to the Rockets, I found a quote from him basically saying that he had regretted leaving LA, but the reason he left LA was because he thought that he and Harden were going to be the new Kobe and Shaq. So that's pretty funny to think about those guys as Kobe and Shaq. But anyways, I digress. 17-18 season, they win 65 games, 65-17. Holy shit. That's amazing, right? That's like best team in the league, basically. But they weren't. They weren't the best team in the league. The best team in the league was still the Warriors that season. And that's why they lose in the Western Conference Finals, 7 games to the Warriors. Harden does win MVP that season, but obviously it doesn't mean very much when you lose in the playoffs. And lose to a team that was basically built to beat them, which Morey has admitted to more than once, that they were trying to build a team to beat the Warriors because they were the best team in the league, so it makes sense. 18-19 season, 53-29, not near as good. They lose in the second round. It's such a weird season. They add Carmelo for 10 games after he gets traded from Oklahoma City to Atlanta and then basically had his contract bought out by Atlanta. Some really bad games, was really in his own head basically after the way Oklahoma City ended. And so then we have basically 2 players now, if we're keeping track, Carmelo and Dwight Howard, who leave Houston, and James Harden kind of never really being the same again. Carmelo does revive his career a little bit in Portland and LA, but I don't believe he's on a team right now. I think he is open to playing for somebody. He isn't retired. So that'll be interesting to see if anyone adds him as a veteran. Maybe the Clippers will, since I know that if you don't know, Nicholas Batum just announced his retirement from the Clippers, and then after this FIBA season with France. So we got kind of a long story here. We're 5 years in now to the story, or 6 years, I think. Yeah, we're 6 to 7 years, really. The Chris Paul thing hasn't worked out. Harden still averaged great numbers. There was a part of the season where Chris Paul was out from injury, and it was basically the Harden show, and he was averaging like basically 40 points a game for a stretch. He ends up that season averaging 36.1 points, 7.5 assists, and 6.6 rebounds. The assists are down because of Chris Paul and the higher scoring. But like I said, they lose in the second round in 6 games to the Warriors again. This is the season I believe that the Warriors lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and LeBron wins his next championship, I think. Let me see. Nope, take that back. This is the second year with Kevin Durant on the team. The year that LeBron won was actually, let's see, 17-18, 18-19. Let's see. LeBron won in the 17-18 season. Oh, no, hold on. Pause for a second. Sorry about that, you guys. So I got confused in my head for a second. 15-16 season, that's the one that LeBron won. That 18-19 year is actually the year that the Raptors and Kawhi Leonard win. So I just got it flip-flopped in my head for a second. So many similar endings for James Harden, unfortunately, that they can kind of get mixed up. You just know that he's going to make it to the playoffs and lose, basically. So Chris Paul doesn't work out. They decide to get rid of Chris Paul. They bring in Russell Westbrook. The reason Russell Westbrook comes in for Chris Paul is because the Thunder are getting bounced out of the playoffs as well. Paul George basically decides, I'm going to go play for the Clippers with Kawhi Leonard. Excuse me. Kawhi having just won a championship with the Raptors. gets to go to any team he wants and basically build the team however he wants. He says, I want to go to LA, and LA, I want you to get Paul George. Trade everything you have for him. That's the only way I'm going. That's what happens. Russ is like, okay, well, I kind of want out too. I don't want to stay here anymore in Oklahoma City. It's been great, but I want to go somewhere to win. I don't want to rebuild. And the Thunder are like, it's cool with us. More picks for us. I mean, obviously we kind of need to get in a rebuilding phase anyways. So that's what happens. They trade Russell Westbrook to the Rockets, and the Rockets actually give not just Chris Paul to the Thunder, but they actually give a first round pick, because back then it was believed that because Chris had another injury, he had lost a step. And he was having arguments with James Harden. Bad stuff was coming out about Chris, like that Chris had been saying James Harden had man boobs. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's pretty hilarious. Especially just kind of funny because one of the things James Harden is infamous for, is when he plays, he would grab you and he would pinch you. He would grab your skin and pinch you. So it's just funny that someone would be making fun of his body. Anyways, and then the Russ thing is weird because they played together on the Thunder, so they obviously had a good relationship. But Russell Westbrook was going into this weird mode where he was basically at his extreme peak of basketball skill, MVP, right before James Harden. And then it just kind of deteriorated from there and became more about triple doubles and less about efficiency. The efficiency of his 3-point shooting, especially, and free throws. So he goes down there. The team, they finished 44-28, not very impressive. Like partially through the season, they trade away their center, Clint Capella, to the Hawks. They decide they want to go with this totally small ball team where basically your centers are PJ Tucker and I think maybe Trevor Ariza back then, Danwell House, all these forwards who shot 3-pointers basically. And they weren't going to worry about rebounding. They weren't going to worry about defense. They're just going to focus on moving the ball and scoring. They had a kind of an interesting thing where Harden and Westbrook didn't play at the same time as much as they did one at a time. More of like what we expected to see between Chris Paul and James Harden. But I digress again. It didn't work. And so, pause recording for Penny to get a little cough out real quick. And I'm back. Sorry about that. She's all good. She just had to get a cough out. Now I didn't want you guys to have to listen to it. So 2020, so the 1920 season, their small ball thing fails. They decide we need to try to save things for Harden before he gets pissed because we keep rebuilding these teams and they keep sucking. So they trade Russell Westbrook, and Russ is fine with it, even though he kind of wanted to stay and do the Houston thing. They made the playoffs. I mean, they lost in the second round to the Lakers, who won the championship eventually, but they weren't that good. They only won the first round, which was a great first round matchup because it was the Thunder who had Chris Paul playing against them. They went 7 games, but the Thunder team, even though they almost won 50 games that year, they definitely had a ceiling. So the Rockets should have beat them, and as they did. In fact, I think they should have beat them sooner, not in 7 games, is what I'm trying to say. 2020-2021 season, 17-55 record. Obviously, something changed here, right? Well, they decided to trade Harden after 8 games. He shows up to training camp in what is surmised as a fat suit. He's extremely overweight, hasn't been working out, doesn't really try. In the games, he's letting the other team take the ball. He's throwing crazy passes. He's not really being a good teammate, basically. The Rockets got John Wall for Russell Westbrook right before then. John Wall thinks he's going to be revitalizing his career with Harden. They're going to be doing things together, but Harden just has no intention of that. While this is all going on, Brooklyn has started anew with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and word starts getting around that Brooklyn wants James Harden, and James Harden wants to go to Brooklyn, and they want to build a big 3 between Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. It's all these names that just keep coming back up. So that's basically what happens. They trade James Harden, and they get some draft picks from Brooklyn. It becomes like a 3-team trade. They get Karis LeVert. It wasn't that that they didn't get very much out of it other than the draft picks, which are pretty nice, like some unprotected ones in the late 20s. Which, if you know now, those are going to actually turn out pretty good because they don't have basically any of those players anymore. They're not, the only player they have left over from all their shenanigans they went through, which we're about to get into, is Ben Simmons. So moving on, we're not going to be looking at Houston anymore. We're moving on to Brooklyn. Actually, the last thing we'll have about Houston is that after this occurs, the 1755 season, Daryl Morey, it's an amicable parting of ways, mutual ending, supposedly, but he basically got fired and then hired by Philadelphia, who has Joel Embiid. So now we're getting closer to the end of the story. We're getting closer to present day time. We're about 10 years into the future now from where we started. 2021 season plays out. They finished 48-24. Brooklyn loses in the second round to the Bucks. Harden doesn't even make it that far because of injuries. Kyrie has a whole thing going on with the vaccines. So it just doesn't work out. And if you see what I'm getting at here, James Harden, no matter where he goes, he keeps putting himself first. And instead of putting the team first, it hasn't worked out for him one time. Ben Simmons is playing for the Philadelphia 76ers at this time. He's not doing very good. He's going through a mental health thing, back injuries. He's just not playing basketball, won't show up to stuff, eventually wants to get traded out of there. So that's what Philly does, is they try to look for a trade, and Daryl Morey tries to look for a way to move Ben Simmons and get another superstar in here with Joel Embiid. He has like a mantra basically that you got to have at least 2 stars on your team. At the same time, Brooklyn lost in the second round, only won 48 games. The next season, they finished only winning 44 games. And just not playing very good. And James Harden is over it. Wants to win championship. Feels like he's wasting his time basically in Brooklyn. Says that he always wanted to go to Philadelphia anyways. Not Brooklyn originally in the first place. So Daryl Morey sees his old player. He wants him. He gets him. He trades Ben Simmons for James Harden. Bada boom, bada bang. We have James Harden, Joel Embiid. And Brooklyn is out on the James Harden sweepstakes basically as soon as they were in on him. And they are now in on this Ben Simmons guy who hasn't panned out for them yet. Philadelphia ends up winning 53 games. Not bad. They do lose in the second round in Miami. And then this last season, they went 54-28. So a little bit of an improvement, but lost in the playoffs again. A lot of talk about Joel Embiid because this season Harden took a pay cut. He kind of he pushed Embiid and helped Embiid to win MVP this season. And he had been losing year after year to Nikola Jokic. And then they not only do they not make do they not win in the playoffs, but they see the Nuggets win and Jokic win. And they see Miami win. And it's frustrating, I imagine, for the ownership in Miami because, one, their guy won MVP, not Jokic, and they still didn't win the finals. 2, the Miami Heat got carried there by Jimmy Butler, a guy that they used to have on the team that they traded away because they basically couldn't get this whole Ben Simmons thing figured out. So you have these teams who basically can't get in control. They want so bad to have a superstar that's going to take them places and make them money. They never worry, or they just don't worry enough about the effect that these guys are going to have on the team. Also, I don't think I have it written down when it happened, but there was a certain point, I want to say during the bubble season, I think it was, where Daryl Morey commented on Twitter about how there were people in human rights issues in Hong Kong, people who aren't allowed to have freedom of speech and regular freedoms like we have here in America as Chinese citizens. And the Chinese government did not like that. And the NBA and basketball is huge in China. NBA players have a ton of business stuff going on there. They make a lot of their money from overseas from there. So not only was China not happy about him saying that, the NBA really wasn't happy. And the players who are making money like LeBron James really weren't happy about that. So that being known, while James Harden this summer is in China, he, going back to the start of my story, he makes those claims that Daryl Morey is a liar and that he will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again. Why? Why does he say that? Well, because remember when I said James Harden took a pay cut? That was kind of a wink thing. He was supposed to take a pay cut this last season and then get an extension the next season, but they didn't want to offer that to him. They didn't want to pay him big money. Once he figured that out, he said, all right, F this. I want to get traded. Trade me to the Clippers so I can play with Russell Westbrook again and Paul George and Kawhi and those guys. And the Clippers were probably semi-interested in that. But if I'm the Clippers, the best you're going to be getting from me is role players. And I don't really even have any picks to give you anymore. So it's role players. That's all I'm going to give you. You can't have Paul George. You can't have Kawhi. And we need Russ because our point guard situation is so dire. So it's it doesn't happen. The trade doesn't happen. And Daryl Morey, if you know Daryl Morey, he doesn't make a trade unless he's going to get a superstar back. He's too stubborn, just like Harden. And that's really what it comes down to is we get these extremely stubborn humans in these two positions of power, and they don't want to give up either. They don't want to compromise anything. And so when you're only willing to have it one way and your way, it's almost impossible to win a championship that way. It takes sacrifice from everybody. So what's next for James Harden? Well, first Philly tried to double down and say, actually, we're going to have him come back and play for us. And then that's when Harden was just like, no, not doing that. Even like reports now, like I mentioned earlier, of him wanting to go to a different team in China. So if he's that serious, which after the Houston stuff and now this stuff and the Brooklyn stuff, don't doubt him. He will go play for China or just stop playing. The dude loves to party. He knows lots of rich rappers and stuff. He's probably got entrepreneurial things going on. Philadelphia, if I was you, man, I would try to find a win now team looking to take him on in a 1-year deal and just take the best you can get before you lose him for nothing. Because that's where it's going. You're going to lose him for nothing. I implore you to look at, this is going to sound crazy. I just have this idea. The Warriors. Warriors have Chris Paul now. They traded for Chris Paul from the Wizards so they could get off the Jordan Poole thing. If you don't know, Jordan Poole got in a fight with Draymond Green where Draymond punched Jordan Poole in the face, basically like knocked him out. So obviously they couldn't stay on the team anymore. There's a lot of talk about Chris Paul not wanting to come off the bench. But you got to have him come off the bench because you can't start him and Steph both at the one. But maybe that's the solution. Maybe the Warriors do a swap of Chris Paul to Philadelphia for James Harden. Then you can start James Harden at the 2, Clay at the 3, Wiggins at the 4, Draymond at the 5. Maybe that's not the way to do it. I don't know. That's just an idea. Interesting idea. More likely teams, though, like send him to Dallas. Let him play with Kyrie. Dallas is in a clear win now mode. Call Boston. They're clearly in a win now mode. Maybe you can get some better role players than like what the Clippers were offering you. Maybe you can get Malcolm Brogdon. You know that the Grizzlies are in dire need of a point guard right now, and they are making do with Marcus Smart. Maybe Marcus Smart would serve better in Philadelphia. You got to accept the fact that you're not going to get anyone better. Like if the Chris Paul thing happens, that's probably the best player you can get for him at this point. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. That's going to be everything I want to say for the NBA talk. I do want to mention that I guess the NBA is doing a rivalry week. I haven't looked into it too much, but it's basically teams playing against each other that they are expected to be like rivals. And I think it takes place during that off week in between the Super Bowl and the end of the NFL playoffs. So that'll be interesting to see what they'd kind of do with that. A lot of stuff going on with that. And then there's also the in-season tournament, which I mentioned before. And they also came out with the national TV games. They basically released a schedule for all the teams. Oklahoma City has 13 national TV games if you count NBA TV, only 8 if you don't count NBA TV. So that's a huge improvement for them, and it's more than the Pelicans got. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah, let's talk about let me check on my dog real quick, and then let's talk about some UFO stuff. Okay, so I'm back. For anyone wondering what's going on with Penny, she's just got some allergies, and so she's got some, this is going to be gross, but mucus, and she's just trying to get it up and out. And if you have a dog that's having mucus issues or coughing issues like that, you can actually help them with pure raw honey. I learned off the internet. It's got to be unfiltered, unpasteurized raw honey. It's just healthier for them versus the other stuff, and it's a very small amount, but you can give it to them basically daily. Anytime they're having like a coughing fit. So she gets some in the morning and some at night, and that helps her. But sometimes I have to stop and give her a little bit extra. She's laying down. So sweet. Okay. UFO updates. Da-na-na. So last week I got into a little bit about what's going on with the government and what I've been learning, and just kind of my thoughts and everything on the UFOs. I have some updates, stuff that I learned that I want to share with you guys, some ideas I want to get into, and then some interesting things that are coming out soon that I think you guys might be interested in too. So first off, excuse me. First off, there's an Australian investigative reporter named Ross Coulthart who has he's pretty well known. He's had one of his first major breakthrough stories where he was covering this surgeon in Australia who was mutilating women during surgeries, and he basically found the guy and was able to prove that he was doing it. So he's very good at his job, and he cares about people. He's trying to find wrongdoings. He's good at that, and so he's basically focused on this UFO topic now. And he went ahead and he's the one who had the interview with David Grush for News Nation, and he went ahead and had a lecture or something to that effect given at this I think it was a university library in Australia, Victoria College Library or something like that. And he talked about basically what he knows and what's been going on. Apparently the public hearing isn't the only sworn testimony hearings testimony that's been given. Behind closed doors, David Grush and other witnesses have already given sworn testimonies to congressmen and to the inspector general. This is why David Grush was basically able to give his public testimony, because the agencies that don't want him to be talking and giving this stuff out knew that he had already told them this stuff. This was basically just so that they could get the information out to the public, which is the whole goal of everything, is to disclose what's going on to the public. So that's kind of made me feel better to know that not only are they already working on it, they've been working on it for like 2 years. And this is why we have that Chuck Schumer bill that mentions non-human intelligence over 20 times and the amendment that they signed into law. That this is why they had so many questions ready to go. I mean, I know that these senators and stuff have teams that help them, but they basically knew exactly what they wanted to ask Grush ahead of time. They wanted to get certain information out to the public to start the public attention, and it worked. I mean, it got my attention. I'm paying attention because of it. So exciting to know that there are forces. I don't want to say forces of good or bad, because it's really hard to tell who's doing what for who. You know, how do we know how many of these politicians are just doing this because they want to run for president someday? It's hard to say. But the ones that have been working on it, trying to find out this information, those are the ones that I'm looking at the most lately. They're still working on getting into a SCIF. If you don't know what that is, it's like a secured something information facility. I want to say secured compartmentalized information facility, something like that, where he would be allowed to tell them more information once he got security clearance. They know where physical SCIFs are to go into. They can't get access to go into them, and they can't get his security clearance approved to tell them more information yet. They're still working on that. dealing supposedly with departments that are stonewalling them. This is according to Representative Luna from Florida. She said that one of the powers of Congress, though, is they're supposed to be able to defund any federal government, not federal government, any federal program that won't play ball, or that will stonewall them and basically will refuse the will of the people. They can take all their funding away. And so that's excuse me, that's kind of their next step that they're looking at, as well as if they can't get inside these skiffs, they're going to go to these buildings where they're skiffs and where they believe non-human intelligence technology is being held, and actually hold the hearing outside. They call it a field hearing at the gate, I assume, is where they'll do it. And they'll have a press conference there too, to put more pressure on them. It just reminds me of when there were prisons that were either had a riot going on or they had some kind of news story going on. They didn't want to let people in or tell them. So then people will set up for press conferences right outside the gate to try to add that extra pressure. It's a really smart idea. So that's kind of what's going on with the government and what they're up to. Also saw the White House get questioned about it by a reporter asking if what they were doing about David Grush and the information he gave from the 40 individuals he interviewed. The White House representative said that basically he said like probably no, but then he said probably yes, we do know about it. And then it was a super long answer. Basically saying that yeah, we are looking into it, but if we knew something, we would definitely tell you guys. Which at the time when I read it or saw it and listened to it, I was like, okay, well, now we know at least the White House is aware. Like either they're somewhat aware or they're fully aware. So that made me feel better. And then to hear about what's going on behind the scenes with Congress and how they're actually taking testimonies already from other witnesses, and the Inspector General is as well. And if you don't know, David Grush's lawyer is Mr. McCullough, who his first name escapes me right now, but he was the Inspector General for the intelligence community for 30 years before and maybe not for 30 years, but for Obama's administration at least. So right before the guy who's in charge right now. So he's credible. He's with someone who knows what the hell is going on, at least as far as the US government was able to find out about. So what does this mean? Well, it means that we are going to get a disclosure. That is legitimately coming. I think it's going to come. I think the big one is going to come from the White House and from the president. We'll see. That's just kind of how it seems. Like they're kind of gearing up on how they want to talk about it. Their representative specifically said they want to get smarter about it. So that means to me that they're working on it. They want to say something soon, but they don't want to sound wrong, which kind of gets into something else I'll get into in a second. But Ross Coulthart also basically guaranteed, based on his information sources, the United States for sure has non-human intelligence vehicles, spacecraft, and they for sure, without a doubt, have bodies, non-human intelligence bodies. He also said that this is his hunch. This isn't for sure. This is just based off the information and evidence he's been getting, that this non-human intelligence has been around for a millennia, at least, not just 90 years. And that the origins of humanity, the non-human intelligence, have something to do with that. So if you think about it, it would answer a lot of questions. There's a lot of things that have happened throughout human history that don't make sense, or we just can't make sense of. Like, for example, our rise to power over the other hominins, like the Neanderthals and the Naledi that they just discovered, the Homo Naledi down in South Africa they just discovered, or I say just discovered, they discovered in 2013. The big animals that we were able to beat, outsmart, and conquer, the different species that we brought along with us as like we went through evolution, like dogs. How we basically, dogs benefited greatly. There's so much stuff that people who are religious talk about happens by design. And I'm semi inclined to agree with them that certain things are by design, such as I think it's like the moon is like 1/400th of the sun. And it's the distance from the moon to the sun is also like 1/400th of the distance or something like, or from the earth to the moon compared to the distance from the earth to the sun is also like 1/400th. And so that's part of the reason like we get these perfect solar eclipses, that perfectly round solar eclipses. And if you don't know, the moon has a lot to do with the earth. It controls our tides. It has a lot of effects on animals, and on there's some even suggest on human health. So it's like set up very specifically to keep us alive, keep this version of life going anyways on earth. It's hard for me to say though that there's a divine higher power that's deciding all this, because it would be hard not to, like, there's a lot of contradictions to that thought, because humans are terrible, right? We kill each other, we steal from each other. You can think about how World War II ended. The Japanese were still fighting. If you've seen Oppenheimer, you're definitely caught up to date on this. But the Japanese were fighting, even though the Germans had already surrendered, and the United States was preparing for a full-scale invasion. The United States didn't want to do that. They didn't want to cost the lives of their own people. They wanted the war to be over. They also wanted to try out these new weapons of mass destruction and basically like flex its muscles as a country, not to just the enemies, but to their allies that would become their enemies, like Russia. And so they used 2 atomic bombs on a country that was going to for sure lose the war. And maybe, we'll never know. We'll never know if they had threatened Japan with that, if they would have surrendered. But we do know that hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the explosion or died from the after effects. And the after effects went on for decades, for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we also have billions of people around the world that are starving, and the way that they make their food every day is by hunting and gathering. And to cook the materials they use are not like stuff we can get at the store, even like nice plastic cutlery. Like they're using stuff that they made themselves. There's people drinking nasty water still. There's people stealing to feed their family still. We pay, people complain about paying $4 a gallon or $3.50 to $4 a gallon for gas, but you know how cheap that gas is because of the fact that we don't let other countries have that kind of energy and gas, basically, like oil. Like part of the reason the oil is so cheap is because we have control over it. If we were another country that didn't have any control and was basically trying to just get it like someone else, would be way more expensive. Or if it was distributed throughout the rest of the world, it would also be way more expensive. We're in a bubble of like blissness, and we don't realize the effect we've had on each other and on humanity. And so I think all that stuff kind of adding in, it makes you wonder a lot about what's the purpose of humanity, because so far it's been horrible. And when people get power, they make bad decisions. Like, well, I don't know about maybe bad decisions, but they make harmful decisions, like the bombings. You can look back in American history at the way Native Americans were treated by the government, told to basically move or die. We're taking these lands. And it's the same kind of thing as like I'm talking about the oil. They want to have more stuff for themselves to make things easier and life easier for them. They didn't look at Native Americans like another sentient, conscious being, just like we are. For some reason, humans, we differentiate from each other. We don't accept the fact that we're the only sentient beings, as far as we know anyways, here. Dogs aren't talking to us, birds aren't talking to us. The next closest thing we have are whales and dolphins, because they seem to be able to communicate and work out things between each other. But whales and dolphins aren't, on apps and building buildings and inventing things. We're special because we get to do that. And even though we have not just one person that can do that, two people that can do that, we have billions of people that can do that all over the world. And yet we still choose ourselves over each other, even though we're all the same. And we're much more alike than the rest of the galaxies and everything. If we're being honest, like the aliens are going to be much more different than us. Talking more about what Ross Coulthart talked about, getting off my tangent a little bit. I do want to go before I move on though. Look into Bended Knee. If you haven't looked into Bended Knee, look at what happened to Native Americans and Custer, the colonel. If you want to see how evil the government can be to innocent people. Moving on though. So he also talked about how why the government is hiding all this information from us, because it's obviously like one of the greatest crimes ever committed. Because who says these people should know more about where we come from and what the reason for everything is? We're going to pause real quick for Penny. Right back. All right. Sorry about that again, you guys. We're back. She's good. She just got to make sure she's okay. That's the main thing. So thankfully, she and and Oscar are both being really quiet. So I'm really appreciative of that, you guys. But obviously my trade-off for that is I got to make sure she's doing okay while she's being quiet. So going back to the UFOs. Why is the government hiding this information? Why are they keeping this stuff from us? It's theorized that it's because they're scared. They're scared of the fact that they don't know how to work these things. They're scared of the fact that there's something out there they can't explain, and that is probably much more powerful than they are. We've all met people like this, A-type people in your job who don't share information with you, or friends or family in your life who keep something from you because they think they just know better and that they deserve to have the information more than you. That's really hard for me to accept or think about, because it pisses me off, because those people aren't any better than any of us, and we deserve to know just as much as they do. I don't think we necessarily need to know what buildings have what carriers and stuff like that, but we deserve to know if there's non-human intelligence. We deserve to know what we come from and what this is all about. To end the UFO stuff, I want to tell a story that I read online last night before I went to bed that I thought was really interesting. And it kind of goes back to the dogs thing. Sorry, I hit my desk, a little bit of shakiness there. I'll stop here in a second. Okay. It's a man named Uncle Jimmy, and it's from this book about secret machines. And I haven't read the book. This is just an excerpt, I believe, from the book, but it relates to all of this. Uncle Jimmy had a farm, and he had these rats on the farm. They needed to get rid of the rats. So he had these 12 terriers, these dogs, come out, and they have it set up to where the dogs will chase the rats and scare the rats into the rat holes. And then Uncle Jimmy and his nephew will wait at the other end of the holes for the rats to come out of, and they'll have spades to whack the rats with, basically kill them. They got to kill the rats because the rats hurt the farm, basically. So they get the 12 terriers out there. They're barking. They're getting blood on their face because they're biting these rats and they're scaring them into the holes. The rats are coming out of the holes, and Uncle Jimmy is killing them with the spade. The nephew's helping. They're killing them. They kill all the rats. And the story, I don't know why, but it says there was like 87 rats or something, some crazy number. And then in the story, after he kills the rats, he goes and takes the spade and goes over to the terriers, who are just like going crazy, barking. They've been mauling these little rats, and he kills all 12 of them with the spade. And the nephew, seeing this, like, starts crying and begging for him to stop. He doesn't understand why we're killing the dogs. And Uncle Jimmy explains that they serve their purpose. That just like the spades and the rats and the dogs, they're all tools. It's all for the purpose of the farm. The farm's all that matters. So the reason I tell you the story is because we may be the rats. We may be the terriers. We may be the spade. Ultimately, how human success, creation, creativity, it could all be stemming from something else using us as a tool. And then it could all end because we're just a tool. That thought is troubling for some people. Obviously, if you're religious, that's troubling because you think your purpose is to be here to meet the foretold purpose of another deity or something, like some god or something that tells you to be this way, and then you can be a part with me. Come join me in some way, somehow, have a better afterlife. I don't know. I don't know that life is for that. I don't know that anyone is supposed to grow up and be president. I don't know that anyone is supposed to be the best music star, pop star, celebrity. I don't know that anyone is supposed to have the best podcast, sports podcast, UFO podcast. I don't know that any of that is actually supposed to matter. Maybe something totally that we're all completely unaware to. Maybe we're supposed to destroy our planet like we have been, letting the climate go to hell. Maybe that's what they want. Maybe they want us to blow each other up with nukes. Maybe that's not it though. Maybe they're trying to teach us to cultivate something better. But we could just be a terrier or a rat and really just be a very small part of it. For some people, like I said, that thought, especially for religious people, that thought's going to be really troubling and hard to deal with. For me, it's a bit of a relief. It's a bit of a relief because it kind of takes the pressure off. It makes the most important people in the world not as important. It makes the most important things not as important. Maybe things are simpler than we make them out to be. I like doing podcasts because I like to learn and I like to explore subjects. And if you can't tell, I like to talk. I like to express myself. And maybe that's where that ends. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to be Carson Daly or George Clooney or people just trying to think of men with over history who were great at communication. Doesn't mean I'm supposed to be any of them. It does mean that I can just be me and I can just enjoy the things that I like because it really just takes off the pressure to try to be anything else. So hopefully that will give you something to think about. Think about the things you like to do. Do you like to do them because you were meant to become some, the best ever of something? Or is it because that you just like doing them and it's not deeper than that? Another thing I want to leave you guys to think about with on the UFO subject is, I think I just lost my train of thought. Well, maybe I'll come back to it. I'll tell you a couple other UFO things. So looking forward in the future, look out for the NASA report, and that should be coming out later from the White House. Be looking out for a new White House report, like I talked about earlier. There's a Steven Spielberg docuseries coming out called Deadline that a lot of people are excited about. I'm excited to see it. Looks really interesting. And hopefully we can get some more information on everything that's going on. I can't remember what the thing was I was going to tell you guys about. I just remember that it had to do with humanity and with just kind of like, I can't remember. Sorry, guys. I'm just going to assume that it had to do with humanity, basically just doing what they felt like and being okay with that. So that's it for UFO stuff. Hopefully I'll have some more for you next week. I do want to close with something kind of fun. My fantasy football draft. I'm doing that later today. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my team so I can tell you guys all who I have. I'm in a dynasty league where we keep players from the previous stuff going on. And I'm going all kinds of stuff on here because we've got our draft today. My team is called Cup of Joe. We've got Joe Burrow, J.K. Dobbins, David Montgomery, Cooper Kupp, DeAndre Hopkins, Cole Kmet, Devontae Adams, Daniel Jones, Tyler Bass. I've got the Cowboys defense. I've got a bench too, but it's not showing yet. Here we go. Oh, a new trade has been processed. My bench guys really aren't near as impressive. It's just like a bunch of not as big name guys, basically. And then the draft, I don't have my first round pick. I traded my first round pick away to get Jameson Williams from a friend of mine. And then Jameson Williams got suspended. So not super happy about that, but definitely going to be looking to try and get a quarterback. It'd be cool to get someone like Malik Cunningham or to get one of these guys that are on one of the new teams, or not the new teams, the new starters, like the Houston Texans guy. I definitely want to get another young quarterback because I don't really love Joe Burrow and Daniel Jones, but I'll let you guys know in the next podcast kind of how that went and what happened. I don't know why. Okay, my bench loaded. Here we go. Matthew Stafford, Cooper Rush, Matt Corral, Andy Dalton. So those are the rest of my quarterbacks. Not super great list there. Ezekiel Elliott, Miles Sanders, Antonio Gibson, Elijah Mitchell, Tyler Algier, Amari Cooper, Tyler Boyd, Corey Davis, Alan Lazard, Greg Dortch, Jahan Dotson, John Mechie, Jameson Williams, Taysom Hill, Tyler Conklin, Noah Fant. Anyways, so yeah, that's going to be the team. My goal is to come up with a good quarterback. I'll let you guys know how I do. In the meantime, thanks again for listening to the Matt Gerow Show. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to see what's going on with me and hear all my thoughts and ideas. Just want to remind everyone that I am on Twitter at Matt Gerow Show. And this is going to be on YouTube where you can watch this. And if you just want to listen to it, it will always be on stuff like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, things, Google Podcasts, things like that. So thank you again so much for listening. I cannot wait to do another one next week. And I also feel like this one was better. So awesome. Good job to me. Thanks to the Beagles. I'm glad they also got some time in kind of. And thanks to you guys. All right. Talk to you next time. Bye.